So Fred Miller, the Khalil Jameson Consulting Group. And we're a management consulting firm. So slides are coming up. So the title of this is The Path to High Performing Inclusive Organizations. The path. How do you get from where organizations are to where they need to be? We have a website, we got Twitter, and we have this about 50 minutes with you to share our thinking. The next slide will say a little bit more about who we are as a firm. So we are the oldest OD firm, organization development firm, and the oldest diversity and inclusion firm in the country and the world. So we're a management consulting firm that uses organization development technology to bring about large total system change and create inclusive cultures that accelerate results. And lots of parts of that sentence, but the part that I would emphasize is accelerate results. Really feel very, very strongly that what we're doing for our client organizations is to help them be better and do their core work better. And for us, the biggest scorecard on that is the results that the organization is trying to achieve. And as you know, we know, many of us know, that if you have people working well together, if they're bringing their differences to the table, if those differences are contributing and helping people see things and do things differently, that in the world that we live in now, it's going to create a good result or a better result than you could otherwise. And accelerating those results is what we need to do as organizations being competitive. We were founded in 1970 by a woman named Khalil Jameson, since deceased, but I kept her name to honor her. And I joined the firm in 79. Before that, I was a client of Khalil, so I was a client of the firm. And then a woman named Judith Katz joined me in 85. She wrote one of the first books around white awareness in 78. Khalil wrote a book about nibble theory. She was one of the first women consultants, OD consultants, and people would meet her and try to think of Pac-Man, try to nibble on her some. So it was like, oh, are you married? Yes. You have children? Yes. Who's home with your children? How can you be out here working and have your children at home? In the 70s, that was kind of how people greeted women in the workplace, especially consultants. Judith and I co-wrote 5 books so far. And she did what I call a boomer retirement, which means that she's sort of around, only does what she really wants to do, but doesn't do any of that stuff she didn't like doing any before. So she's around and about, and we're co-writing articles still, but she's not doing some of the other stuff. So that's a little bit about who we are. We wrote one of the first books about diversity in 94. We wrote the first book about inclusion in 2002. And then we've written 3 books since then that really speak to the behaviors that are necessary to create an inclusive and diverse organization. The last one, Safe Enough to Soar, came out a couple of years ago, and it's about interaction safety. I know people are talking about psychological safety, which I think is great and wonderful. As those people were writing that book, we were writing about interaction safety. And I think in the workplace, talking about interaction safety is kind of more appropriate than talking about psychological safety. Most places, if you go to your manager or supervisor and say, I don't feel psychologically safe, they're going to send you to the nurse's office. So, but if I say to my supervisor or manager, I don't feel like I have interaction safety, they're going to feel like that's a responsibility in order for people to do their best work. So that's a little bit about who we are. And I want to talk about the path to inclusion and what that means. And that's the model that I want to share with you. And there's lots of pieces of this. You know, like many people who have been working in the area of inclusion and diversity, we got a lot of phone calls during right after George Floyd. Can you see everybody's faces? Right after George Floyd. And you know, people were calling up and they were saying, you know, we're not inclusive or we're not diverse. What can we do? You know, can you come in and give a speech and then we'll be okay? And so it's kind of helping people understand that this is not a light switch. This is not something that you just turn and can make happen overnight. Go to the next slide. We're having slide delay here. Sorry. So too many organizations approach inclusion and diversity like turning on a light switch. Simply wiring the right number of individuals of different backgrounds, styles, gender identity, colors, abilities, nationalities, and other differences. Turn on the power and hope for success. And that's what we have experienced. Some of the clients who are calling us up, or potential clients calling up, talking about. It's like, okay, what can we do? How can we do something quick? How can we get this behind us? And that's not the reality that this is we're living with. That's not the reality of change that we're talking about. That we're really talking about a process of change. I always think about it as a developmental process. Can I see people's faces? Developmental process where, like a child, the child has to learn how to crawl before they walk before they run. And that's the same thing around organizations going from being a non-inclusive, non-diverse organization, a monocultural organization, to being a more diverse organization. There are phases that the organizations have to go through. And that's what I'm going to talk to today, is the phases that the organization needs to travel in order to move through that. And it's not a light switch. It's not going to like do one and done. It's not like 5 minutes and over. It's a process that can take time. It doesn't have to take forever, but it's a process that takes time for the organization to move through. So I want to start with the beginning of the model, the PATH model. And the PATH model starts with the exclusive club. And that's how many, many organizations started. They start as our kind, people like us are okay. And people who aren't like us, we don't necessarily want in our organization. Figure most businesses are family businesses, right? Most businesses start off as family businesses, some stay family businesses. One of our clients is Campbell Soup, family business. You know, so that's kind of the norm and businesses starting up. And then it's like, okay, if you're in a family or you're a neighbor or you're a relative, then it's okay. If you're not one of them, then that's not people we want to have in our organization. Often in organizations, there's a sign up that says this group not allowed, this group not okay. I've done workshops where people have brought in the original deed on their houses, and some of the original deeds said, you cannot sell this house to a Negro or a Jew. In the deed, it was said, you can't sell a house to a Negro or a Jew. So sometimes it was written into the covenant and how things are and how they need to be and how they're going to maintain the line. Exclusive clubs, the sign's up, and it's basically say these other people are not allowed. No, we don't want people with disabilities. We don't want people who are gay, lesbian, transgender. We don't want whatever those may be these days. Eventually, for many organizations, the sign comes down, but the behaviors are still there, that it's still a passive club, that it still has all of the norms and values. And one of our clients, we were talking about the old behaviors and norms are in the walls, it's in the pipes, it's in the water. And if you don't do something very proactive, you're not going to necessarily change the organization. So constantly, you got to have that passive club, that the sign is down, but very much the behaviors are still there, the way of being is still there, people are challenged that way. And so organizations aren't exclusive anymore, but they're passive. Many, many organizations today are still passive clubs in many, many aspects of how they operate. The next point along the continuum is, the next thing along the continuum is talking about judging. That when you talk about an exclusive club and a passive club, often what we're talking about is people judging other people. You're going to see as we go to the green area later, that's talking about joining people. But in this aspect of the PATH model, we're really talking about judging people. System, culture based on the dominance of one culture, one style, one group. Once we were with a client, he said, we like people like us. Why would we hire people who aren't like us? So having that feeling that we are the right people and other people are not quite right. And move to the next item. And if they come into the organization, if they join the organization, we want them to act like us. So you might be able to look different or be different in some way, but our expectation of you is that you are going to be like one of us. So symbolically different. I was in a group recently, and we had done some interviews. and there were two Latinos in the group. And I asked them about how they feel in the organization, what was going on, was it working for them? And they were like, yes, it's good, we like it here, all those things. And then I said, well, what happens if you speak Spanish? Oh, we can't do that. Oh, if we do that, our coworkers are not happy with us because they think we're talking about them. How about if you do some of your own customs, or you do some of your own, holidays and celebrate? No, we don't do that here. So to the degree that they conformed and acted like everybody else, then they were okay. But to the degree that they brought in their difference in the organization, then they were not seen as okay in the organization. That's still true. And a lot of our organizations, you're expected to conform to the norm, conform to that group the behaviors of that initial group that still exists inside of the organization. So symbolic difference. So, but somebody's got to be the first, somebody's got to be the only, somebody's got to be that trailblazer in the organization. And so organizations often are going to have that one first, that only, that few that come in that are different than the norm. It could be lots of different, it could be everybody's from, Midwest schools and you're from the East. It could be everybody, is from one discipline and you're from another discipline. It's not always the traditional, what people think about around diversity. It could be any difference that people bring that's outside of the norm of that traditional group in the organization. We call these people trailblazers because they have all the dynamics of a trailblazer, of trying to survive in an environment that's not necessarily totally comfortable or even supportive of them. And so they're blazing a trail for themselves and others inside the organization. The challenge around trailblazers is that they have so many jobs they're trying to do at one time. So the list of trailblazers, list of jobs is pretty long. They have to be more than competent to do their job because people are watching them. They're under a microscope. Able to fit into organization, its culture. Okay, be like us. I know. I mean, we're still getting comments about African-American women and how they wear their hair. And oh no, that's not quite the way we want you to be wearing your hair around here. We wear our hair out. No, we don't want you to have that hairstyle. I mean, we're getting that. We're getting comments about accents from people in organizations. So fit in, be a part of, act like us. Number 3, willing to take responsibility for making other people in the organization feel comfortable. Number of times we hear, oh, well, that person's not quite going to make it here because people don't feel comfortable around them. So that person's job, that person who's different, whatever that dynamic they bring, their job becomes to make everybody comfortable inside of the organization. How do I make it okay for them not to be upset or not to be worried or not to be afraid of me? A challenge in the organization, especially when there's social issues that are still unresolved in the country and people haven't figured it out. So you got transgender people in the workplace. Yeah, we got this big issue around bathrooms, which they don't seem to have in Europe as much as we have, or these other issues that are floating around that I'm struggling with. Willing to accept the spotlight and the visibility of being the only one or one of few of a kind. Often that person who's different, that one of a kind or one of few, they're the ones on the cover of the website. They're the ones that are talked about. They're the ones that get interviewed when we talk about diversity. So again, another job. Able to represent their identity group. So Fred, what's happening with those Black people in Minneapolis? Why are they acting that way? So all of a sudden I become the knowledgeable person. I become the representative, or the way that I act is the way people think everybody like me looks like me acts. Capable of disproving colleagues' preconceptions about members of their own identity group. No, everybody who's like me doesn't do X, doesn't do Y. Willing to accept and work to overcome colleagues' discomfort, or their job before, make people comfortable. Able to deal with questions as to whether the job was attained because of competency or difference. Are you just an affirmative action hire? How did that person get hired? Did they go through the normal interview process? Can we know that they're going to be able to do the job because maybe they just got the job because of their difference that they bring to the organization? and then serves on committees and task forces, employees resource groups, public appearances related to their identity. None in their job description, but all of a sudden they're asked to do all these things. So if we look at the model of the change process and we look at, this symbolic difference point in time, then what we find is that person, go back one slide, please. What we find is that one more. Sorry. We find that person is doing multiple jobs. And as the organization is kind of moving down the path to being more inclusive, which is in the green part on the right-hand side, that these are some of the challenges and barriers that people experience in the organization as they are trying to bring their difference. And the organization experiences as it's trying to have itself be more diverse as an organization and then be more inclusive. So let me just stop there and just hear any thoughts or comments, reflections. How's this make sense? Any experiences you have or anything that you would like to add? Let's see, please. We have, when the thing with George Floyd happened, everybody was going out to talk to their Black employee to say, how does it feel? How do you feel? And some of the Black employees said, the supervisor never talked to me in 2 years. And all of a sudden they're coming to talk to me about how do you feel about what happened to George Floyd? Or how do you feel like Black Lives Matter? Absolutely, so how do I learn how to interact with others? How do I bring those skills? Some people don't have those skills. So if I'm a manager and I have a diverse group, but I can't manage diversity, then I'm the incompetent one. I don't care how many credentials I have and how many universities that I've been to. The fact is that I can't have this diverse group come together and be successful, but I'm going to screen out people because I can't manage them. Then I'm the problem, not the people are the problem. I'm the problem. And so what's the competency for leading a diverse organization? And are we going to have that on people's job descriptions so that they are responsible for having that competency so we can have the best organization we can have? Or do we just want to leave people out of the organization and not consider them for their difference because we have managers who can't manage them? Not many organizations would organize it that way. They say, well, we have managers who can't manage very smart people, so we're not going to hire smart people. I mean, we have managers who are not very good at hiring people who have accents, so we're not going to have people with accents in our organization. Sounds crazy, but historically in that passive club, that's kind of how the world works. Now we're trying to change that. Okay, I'm going to move on unless I see another hand right now. Okay, let's go back to the model. So as you go down the model, you really get to this area of the upside down triangle at the top. This is tolerance of difference. And that's really saying that as we started in the model, there was little tolerance of difference, that top corner, part of the triangle, angle of the triangle. Then as we go down the model, the tolerance of difference becomes more and greater, and that's why it's wide there. But this is really not about tolerating people. Tolerating people is not having them be included. Tolerating people is not supporting and joining. Tolerating people is, I'll hold my breath and hope this goes away. I'll hold my breath and hope I don't have to do anything. So tolerance is not what we want. It's not the goal. It's part of the process for some people because they have to get the tolerance before they get to acceptance, but it's not the goal. The other factor, what you see in red, is the transition. Because as you move from symbolic difference to critical mass, you're starting to get a change in the organization. And that change in the organization is that transition. It's the red area on purpose, because as you're moving to critical mass, things start to shift. And critical mass is both the people who are different that you bring into the organization and their allies. I like to remind myself and others, no revolution was successful without having allies from the predominant group or the group in power, never. So that having an alliance of the people who are new, who are different, who are like moving for change, and some of the people who have been with the organization coming together as mentors, as sponsors, as just co-conspirators on change is absolutely critical. But that transition period is hard. In that transition, you have people saying, we're going too fast, slow down, we're going too fast, too many changes. And you have people who are saying, we're going too slow. Why is this going so slow? We need to make this change. Let's make it happen now. Why is it taking so long? Look at people leaving while we're waiting to make this change. Can we get there? And so there's almost a tug of rope that's happening in organizations as you have those people who are wanting to go faster and those people who want to think it's going too fast. Too many rules changes, too many new competencies, too many ways of doing it. So that critical mass is great for the organization, but it's an area of tension and challenge. Can we have the next slide, I think? So I'm going to ask you and let you go into breakout rooms for about 8 or 9 minutes. And what are some of the interactions that you have experienced or seen in your organization or organizations you've been a part of related to the stages of the path model that we've discussed so far? So have you seen the exclusive club? Have you seen the passive club? Have you seen Trailblazers? Have you seen critical mass? And when it starts to being more than one and critical mass and change, kind of what have you seen the organization do? Have they said, yay, we're moving along, we got more of X group, Y group, Z group, and we're happy? Or do people say, whoa, what are you doing to us? What? That's where you get the unqualified stuff from. That's where you get the other stuff about, wait a minute. We had some old nice behaviors and now we're changing it. I've been pushing on our clients to really talk about artifacts. What are some of the artifacts of the past that you're holding on to in the organization that you need to let go of? Because some of this is just being a higher performing organization. And some of this is things that are in the organization that are norms and behaviors that make it difficult for people to do their best work. It's not as if organizations, everybody there before the people who are bringing difference were doing their best work. Often organizations, because of all that restriction and constraint, I'll say one example, and then I'll put you in small groups. We were working with Toyota Motor Sales, and we were working with a group of leaders, about 2 levels below the top. And all of a sudden, one of the white men came into one of our workshops with a beard. He didn't have a beard before. We said, whoa, you have a beard, what's going on? He said, well, I got promoted about 3 weeks ago. I'm never gonna go any higher in the organization. Now I can be myself. Now I can be myself. A lot of fantasy about all the white men are having a good time and everybody else isn't. That's not necessarily true in our organization or any group. The men are having a good time and all the men are having a good time and just not the women or whatever those differentiations are in the organization. The salary people are having a good time and the hourly people are not. What you find in an organization, if any group is not being able to do their best work, other groups are not able to do their best work too. Maybe not to the same degree, but it's all part of the mix of the organization underperforming everybody in the organization. Okay, so we're gonna put you in small groups for a while, let you bring your voice to this conversation, then come back here a couple of comments, and then I'll finish up the rest of the continuum. Welcome back. Yep. So we probably have about 10 minutes or less left, so I'm gonna keep moving us.
Good.
So we'll go back to the diagram. So we did critical mass. And then you have a welcoming organization. We have a welcoming part of this continuum where people start accepting people, beginning, hellos, greeting people, seeing them. People feel seen in the organization. So I'm no longer feel like the invisible person in the organization. I start feeling like I count. I start feeling like people are beginning to know me and wanting to know me. And then it's affirming. Affirming is really that I'm really feeling a part of. I feel affirmed. I feel affirmed for my difference. My difference is not seen as something that's odd in the organization or not aligned with the organization, but my difference is very much feeling like this is you. We need you here. You're a part of it. On the article, we can send you a copy of this article if that would be helpful. So you can either put a note in chat or you can just send a note to us. And then the last part of the continuum is really when inclusion becomes a way of life in the organization. That is how we are, it's how we be. How would be another way? So it included is people feeling a part of it. They feel like they have agency in the organization. They feel supported for who they are as an individual and their group identity. And that there's a supportive energy in the organization where people are patting each other in the back versus stabbing each other in the back. So I'm feeling like leaders and colleagues and others are cheering for me and celebrating me. We had a client once that they were bringing in a woman plant manager, and it was the first time they had a plant manager in the organization. The current plant staff, before the woman came, took bets on how long she would last. Took bets on it. And when the CEO heard about it, he just flipped out. He's like, I'm trying to bring people in it, and y'all betting on when they're going to leave? Incredible. So inclusive organization, I'm cheering, I'm celebrating, I'm appreciating, I'm valuing the differences that people bring. I'm seeing those differences as helping us be better, smarter. And in the world that we're living now, if you go back to that exclusive club and that passive club, when it's kind of one way of seeing things, we don't live in a world where one way of seeing things is going to be successful. We never get to the moon or to Mars or anywhere if we just have one discipline trying to figure out the answer. We need that multidisciplinary, that multi-human species group of people working together to create the best answer possible. So the last part of the diagram is really joining. How do we join each other, system and culture, based on the added value of difference in culture and style and groups? I see people coming to me that are different from me, and I'm curious. I want to learn from them. I want to grow. I know I will grow from them. I know I will grow because I'm going to know more because they're there and they have seen some of the world or experienced some of the world different than me. Yes, we have similarities. We want to celebrate and appreciate the similarities, but we're also going to have differentiation, and that's also important to us. So for us, again, it's a developmental process. So when those organizations call and say, you know, we need to just, you know, give us a pill and we can be okay and we can be inclusive and diverse, it's not real. It's a process. And what's struggled in the country and what's been so long around this is that we keep trying to take shortcuts and not really doing the work we need to do in order to move down that path from the exclusive club, passive clubs, where many organizations have been and some still are, especially passive club and symbolic difference, to an inclusive organization, and not try. That's the biggest thing for our clients is like, slow down. Don't try to skip a lot of steps because all you're gonna do is have a revolving door, or you're gonna have people feeling bad or feeling less than. So for us, it's like, okay, let's go through this process. We can do this. This can be successful. The transition is hard because you're gonna get rid of and let go of some of the old ways, but you're gonna take on some new ways that are gonna have you more positioned to be successful in the future than you would be without those things. And as long as we can tie this to bottom line, organization, mission, and vision and strategy, it works. When we try that to our clients all the time, they're not a social service agency. Don't do this because you're doing a social service societal thing. Do this because it's going to help the organization be more successful as a principal, as an organization. Okay, I'm going to stop there and appreciate y'all. And thanks for being with me, and I'll turn it back over.
Thanks, Fred. We did have a question in the chat come in from Preeti. Preeti, you want to unmute yourself and give voice to your question?
Super.
Fred, I wanted to ask you, which organizations do you work with that are in the green?
I have not seen an entire organization in green, but I have seen pockets of organizations in the green. We did a lot of work with Merck Pharmaceutical Company, and we worked with their organization in Singapore and around the globe, as well as the United States, and we saw organizations do that. We did work at O'Hare Airport with United Airlines, and we saw pockets of that doing it. And I think two factors. One is organizations are in motion and transformation, so it's not like it gets fixed and it's there, it's moving. But we have seen pockets in plants and in factories and in headquarters where people have been able to practice the behaviors that are necessary and be able to transform that part of the organization. And that we've been very successful at being able to do that. So there are examples of that, but there's no one organization I would say gets the A+, they did it grade. Okay.
Awesome. Why don't we all unmute ourselves real quick just to give Fred a big round of applause and say thank you for the learning today.
Amen. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
I appreciate it.